Welcome to the City Council Finance meeting. It is called Capital Plan 2, where we are going to discuss some of the projects that are proposed within the capital plan. And Andy has provided us with some really good background that we had asked for as a follow-up regarding our bonding, a breakdown, where we are, what we've spent, and we have a lot of information that Andy has forwarded. So without further ado, thank you for joining us also, Councilmember Gully. We'll stand. Councilmember Cummings, I can run and get the flag if you don't have one readily available. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Beautiful picture, Nasha. Okay.
Figured I'd switch it out.
Okay, I love it. Roll call. Councilmember Gully.
Next to the fire chief.
Here.
Councilmember Ash McPherson. Here. Councilmember Steele.
Present.
Councilmember Cummings.
Present.
Councilmember Zaluski.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott.
Here.
Council President Mantello's here. We have all 7 present. Do you mind? I think I see the mayor way in the back. Mayor, do you want to start off? Who's in the room and go around?
Why don't you start? We'll just introduce ourselves and go around.
So, I'm here, the City Comptroller, Andy Petrowski.
Bill Wangler, Traffic Supervisor. I'm Abbott, Sanitation Supervisor.
Bill Donardo, Street Supervisor.
Greg Tudor, Golf Course Superintendent.
Sean Hooley, Central Garage Supervisor.
Eric McMahon, Fire Chief.
Monica Kuziewski, Deputy Mayor, and I do believe Dan DeWolf is potentially on his way.
Awesome. Wow, we got a full crew.
Also served as a mic.
We'll try not
Also
to.
served as a mic check. Could you hear everyone?
Could you hear everybody when they talk?
I could. Mayor, you are the faintest.
Okay.
Okay. So this evening, this is a follow-up to many of the questions, the conversations that took place with the capital plan a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a couple of months with all the meetings that we've had. We're slowly winding down with our budget. And, you know, I do want to thank Andy. I think he tried to really break down the information where it makes sense. And I think, Andy, we first talked about maybe starting off first with the, we'll do the capital plan after the, what do you want to start out with first? The bands?
Do you want to, do you want to start, we can start by going through everything that I sent last night. And go from there, and then, you know, go through where we stand right now with bond anticipation notes. I think that we do need to have a conversation about the memo that I sent last night, in which there's a proposal to change the funding of the capital plan for some of the items. To go through that, where that money would come from, how the amounts were determined. That was in the memo. Attached to that was a breakdown of what would be funded from what source. Greg Tudor is here to go through the golf course master plan as was requested, and then the other supervisors and chiefs are here or are en route to answer any specific questions about items in the capital plan, if that works for everyone.
Sounds good, Andy. You know, I did want to also real quick, Andy. So the mayor issued a press release today regarding the brands. And, you know, I do understand. I actually emailed Andy and said, I knew obviously that we didn't spend the RAN. We had talked about that. And the repayment kind of threw me off because I knew we had authorized and I knew we hadn't dipped into it at all. We didn't use it. And obviously, that was, obviously not just the mayor, the administration, but also the council. And I really feel that needs to be said. This was a true teamwork last year, getting through COVID, all the revenues that we had lost through COVID, the expenditures that we had cut back. We made like immediate in March, if you recall, Council Member Zaluski, we had the conference call with Andy, conference call with the mayor, Monica was on the call, and all of us going back to our caucuses. I really truly believe this was a huge team effort. Obviously, Mayor, I get it, the release, but I really want to go a step beyond and just give a real pat on the back to all the folks at that table, including the folks that aren't at the table, the council on both sides of the aisle, and obviously Mayor, you and Monica and Andy, we all did it together to ensure that we were doing everything humanly possible to try not to put the burden on the backs of the taxpayers, at the same time get through the year financially and not have to dip into the rand. So just me saying, I just want to say kudos to everyone. And I think it was, a real Herculean effort by everyone to really get through last year in such a tough and challenging year. So that's just something I wanted to kick off with. And Andy, I appreciate you explaining everything that you had sent last night. So let's get rolling. And if anyone has questions, hop in, the drill, and we'll get this rolling. So thank you, Andy.
So I apologize for how small this is. It was a bit of a challenge to get all this on singular pieces of paper. So this is the cover sheet. As you know from the presentation that I sent last evening, I just want to touch on the bottom, the summary of balances. As we sit here today, there's $67 million outstanding in bond anticipation notes. We anticipate paying down $22.8 million in 2022, converting $12.9 million to long-term debt, with a remaining outstanding balance of $31.2 million. The principal portion of that balance, as you will see on the next 2 pages, comes from 3 projects. The ongoing Siemens Energy Improvement projects, comprised of Phase 2, the acquisition and conversion of the streetlights, and Phase 3, which is a variety of things such as the new salt shed, the new traffic and facility building, the improvements to the facade and roof of other DPW buildings, and the 118 other streetlights that are involved in that project. The second project is the water line replacement project from the Tomahannock to the water plant, which we will certainly discuss in much more length on Thursday evening. And the third project is the Cso Project. If you take the $67 million outstanding today, 34% of them will be paid off in 2022. 19% will be converted to long-term debt, and 47% will be reissued. The next page
Andy?
looks at, and if there's,
Andy?
yes.
Before you move on, do any council members, before we go into the breakdown, I mean, obviously the breakdown will explain this much deeper, but did anyone have questions before we move on? Okay, cool. Thanks, Andy.
So looking at specific projects, and just to go through the heading, I attempted to try to reflect the information that was requested at prior budget hearings. So you have the project description, the operating fund that it originates from, the department in which is overseeing the operational and the actual project itself, the percent of the project that is completed, if there's grant funding associated with the project, what is remaining on the bond resolution that has not been issued. When the city council passes a bond resolution, I do not go and issue the debt immediately. We issue the debt in tranches of 6-month increments, as needed for cash flow. That saves the city money in interest costs and does not have debt sitting idly, especially on construction projects that take 1 to 2 years to complete.
And the authorization allows us to enter into contract.
The blacked out sections of balance of resolution are reflective of projects that are complete. Then it's the 2021 individual bands outstanding, the pay down in 22, the serial bond to be issued in 22, and the estimated amount to be outstanding at the end of next year. We have already forecasted out all debt payments for the next through December 31st, 2022.
Also, on the sheet, the highlighted areas on that far right column, estimated 2022 outstanding, there's a light gray, blue, pick a color. Those have grants associated with them as well.
So the
Okay.
first set, and then there's blocks, as you can see, of the different projects. The first block is projects that are completed. I just want to touch on 3 items of note here. South Troy Road Phase 1, you see that there's an amount to be renewed of $2.9 million. I expect that to be much lower. The engineering department is currently closing out the project with Department of Transportation. It depends when reimbursements are received if the ban is paid off. And the example of that is the seawall, which has $7.4 million outstanding as we sit here today, bond anticipation notes, only because of when the subsequent grant funding from FEMA was received. Those bond anticipation notes are on the February issuance. The city received the FEMA grant in March of 2021. If we had received the funding prior to the reissuance date, the bans would have been paid off. The second item of note, building demolitions of $420,000. That is a PPU, a period of probable usefulness of 5 years. I will be keeping that on ban as that's paid off because it's a lower interest rate. And that is the same thing for the golf equipment of $33,000. It's a PPU of 5 years. There's no sense in putting it on long-term debt. It is permissible under New York State finance law. Are there any other questions about specific projects listed on this block of funding?
Just taking a look at it. Do council members have any questions regarding the status of various projects, the monies used? So now, Andy, for instance, the South Troy pool. So, you know, the 1.4, bloop, 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 okay. So nothing is outstanding on that, correct? Meaning,
The 1 point,
Goes to serial bond 22.
meaning invoices?
and I
Or debt.
noticed, so when you say 2022 bond, you broke it out, I take it, when you issued the bonds?
What do you mean?
Forget it. So I'm just trying to understand your chart, so.
So what I mean by on here is, if it's in the serial bond column, it's going to be converted to long-term debt. It's currently, everything that's on these 2 pages
Okay,
is short-term debt. We will be converting all of this to long-term debt. The
Okay.
$10,730,000,
got it.
excuse me, is the estimated long-term debt conversion between the 2 issuances we have next year.
Okay, that makes much more sense to me. Councilmember Cummings and then Councilmember Ash McPherson.
I think Cash McPherson was first, sorry. Either way.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Ash McPherson. You were first, sorry.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to be clear on this. So I'm just gonna stick with the South Troy pool because she used that one for the renovation. It was 1.485 that we bonded for, correct? To do the pool?
There's $1.485 million in
Right.
short-term debt as we sit here today. In 2022, the city will pay down, just for round purposes, $187,000 on that debt. The outstanding
Okay.
principal balance of $1,298,000 will then be converted to long-term debt.
You're not bonding again. We've already bonded for the 1.4. This is just the
Correct.
difference that you're converting to long-term debt. Did I
Correct.
say that
So
right?
it's
Okay.
funny. So
Sorry.
Kim, think of it like a construction loan. You know how like when you build a house or build a property, you get a construction loan, and once the construction is done, it reverts to like a mortgage?
Yeah.
It's a very similar process, just in the general municipal finance world. It's a
Okay, I just wanna
construction,
make
it's a
sure we-
short term.
Yeah, I didn't want to make sure I was reading this wrong, thinking that we were going to do another bond for 1.2 million. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, I understand it now.
Yep, it converts from a
Thank you.
construction to a mortgage. Yep.
Yep, thank you.
And the long-term bonds are, I'm sorry, Councilmember Cummings, and then I'll ask.
That's fine. The estimated pay down column, is that primarily either grant funds that are reimbursing, I see on some of them, or just leftover that we didn't actually spend, or is some of that actually, 2022 general fund money that is going into paying down these?
So it's, if you took the aggregate of the general water, sewer, and garbage funds, Department 9730, item code 600, which I don't have in front of me, the grand total. The difference between the grand total on all of these, on these 2 pages, and the pay down, less what is budgeted for, is either grants or unused debt proceeds. It's a combination of all 3. If it's not in the budget, it is primarily grant funds. There are certain instances where there are unused debt proceeds. For example, when the fire department has purchased pumpers, the city we've budgeted the bond resolutions have authorized the full cost of the pumpers. However, the vendor, if you pay for the chassis in advance, you recognize, I believe, a 10% savings in the cost. We have had unused debt proceeds from the pumpers because we have always recognized that savings. So it varies by project of, South Troy Road is grant, Bike Trails grant, Ingalls Head Boat Launch is grant, Tropical Storm Irene is grant. Most of them are, but when you start getting down into the capital plan items, it's a budget appropriation and, if applicable, unused debt proceeds.
Perfect. Thank you. That's helpful.
It's a good question, really good question, Councilmember Cummings. And so Andy, the long-term debt, how do you decide how many years? Because it's not all lumped together. Are they, are some 2 years, are some 10 years, or is it all lumped together and then put out for so many years?
It's all lumped together. So if the simplest way to explain it is, if you go to long-term debt on 2 items, one has a remaining PPU of 10 years, the second item has a remaining PPU of 20 years, and they're both $1 million. The life of the note would be for 15 years. It's a weighted average of the PPU of each applicable item and the total amount that is going on the bond. Generally, when we've gone to serial bond, they've ranged from 15 to 25 years.
And the Campbell Ave, the engineering, Andy, thank you. The Campbell Ave, the engineering, that initially we had in the budget, and we had to take it out of the budget due to our short revenues coming in, correct? Wasn't that initially?
Correct.
I think, all right. And because of COVID,
Correct.
we had to take it out of the budget. Okay. And none of that is reimbursed, only 15 from a state grant.
So the you're thinking of the Campbell Avenue Bridge, which is a DOT project,
Oh, I'm
80%
sorry.
reimbursed.
Yep. Okay. And that's on the next page. All right. Yes, I am. That's the intersection. Okay. All right. This is good.
Are
The
there any other
Knickerbocker
questions on
was-
this page?
Yeah, I do. I'm just going through like one line by line. It's really, really good. The Knickerbocker pool. So was that totally a reimbursed grant or, oh no, what was that funded through?
The last item on the page,
Yeah,
that was this,
You're not utilizing it.
we're not utilizing it. There's going to be other funding sources proposed for this project. That was a standalone, no grant behind it project that I believe was passed 2 years ago.
No, 3.
3. It was when the budget was approved on the 4th
Correct.
floor.
yes, I now recall, and we added Knickerbocker to the South Troy and, okay, yep. Okay. All right. Did anyone else have any questions? Now, real quick, what's the South Troy roadway, that's just all timing, correct? The phase 1, the reimbursement?
Yes, they're working on closing that out now. The goal is to have them close it out. It's a tight window because the predominant portion of those bond anticipation notes, to my memory, is on the January 31st issuance date. So just for context for the council, the way issuances work is we'll actually begin working on that issuance next week. That will involve myself, fiscal advisors, and Bond Shennick and King. We need the amounts to be issued, paid down, and converted to serial bond are finalized at the end of December, so that there's a offering on the debt that financial institutions respond to. So there's a tight window here to close it down. I've had conversations with both the Commissioner of Planning and the City Engineer about the importance of getting this closed out in the next month and a half. Excuse me.
Cool. And if council members could just speak up, only because I can only see part of you. So if you put a hand up, I might not see you.
Council President.
Yep, Council Member Ash McPherson.
Andy, I'm looking at the garbage fund, the 5-year capital plan for the 647,500. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, so that dollar amount is you're putting it in this plan here because it hasn't been approved. You're just anticipating all of that getting approved and looking at, for all those items, it's for the garbage truck, 1, 2, pickup truck.
This is an old capital. That's an old capital plan. That's the 2020 capital plan.
We haven't gotten to next year's.
What I'm showing right now.
I'm looking at the 2021.
What I'm showing.
Sorry. I'm looking
Anything
at
that we're just.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All this.
I hate Zoom.
What I'm showing right now are the currently outstanding bond anticipation notes, not reflective at all of any bond resolutions that are being proposed as part of the 2022 budget. That's the second part of the presentation
Right.
that I'm giving.
This is just to give you an understanding of where we are right now before the budget.
Yeah, if you recall, all of us honestly had, real concerns when we were going over the capital plan more. Okay, wait a minute, let's take a step back and figure out where are we with our bonding and what's outstanding, what's complete. I mean, this is really, really good, Andy, in terms of data. So
I apologize. I had the wrong budget book in front of me. I was looking at the wrong one. That's why I was getting confused on the numbers. I apologize. Thank you.
You're fine.
Council President?
Yep, Councilmember Cummings.
So on these outstanding, the whole outstanding column would be reissued minus the roadway if that gets resolved. Is that the idea? And I guess
The only
it's most
thing
of
that
the
would,
roadway.
the only,
Um,
yes, but I actually think that amount will, depending on the
Right.
closeout.
no, I understand that.
That-
The question I had about that is there a cost to the city if that bond does have to be reissued, or does that end up just getting reimbursed either way? Like if it doesn't happen before January, do we carry the interest, or does the grant carry the interest?
The city carries the interest, and if it's on a band, not a serial bond, it'll be substantially lower interest. So we'll get to it. Included in what was sent last night was a payback analysis.
Okay.
That was, so the interest rates, just to jump ahead on that, just to give some context, currently, the effective interest rate that then these are very conservative estimates from fiscal advisors. The effective interest rate on a bond anticipation note is 0.5%, and on a 15-year tax-exempt serial bond, the effective interest rate is 2%. Effective meaning after premium received. And again, that's very conservative. We just got 0.3% on the band in July.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move along to the next page.
So the next page has 3 blocks. I'm going to address the two first. Ongoing projects, variety of different items. Beltray Road Phase 2, which they anticipate construction beginning in 2022. Firehouse improvements, that was issued only because of the financial impact of COVID-19. It's the same situation as the Campbell Ave, Spring Ave intersection that we just discussed. Campbell Avenue Bridge, which has construction anticipated to begin in 2022. Golf course improvements, that bid was opened yesterday. The dollar amount, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, was very, very good. The construction for phase 1 of the golf course will begin in 2022. The paving and sidewalk, non-CHIPS, non-every other paving program in New York State, funding that was approved several years ago. I do want to address that for 1 second. The city has 4 programs that can get reimbursed for street paving. CHIPS, Pave New York, Extreme Winter Recovery, and then the arterial maintenance funding that was in the 2021-2022 state fiscal year budget. The paving and sidewalk, $350,000, has been 30% used. The engineering office is only using that money if it can't be reimbursed under one of the other 4 programs, which is incredibly difficult to do in the current nature with the way they structured the arterial maintenance money. So they are using the $5.4 million to get the reimbursements prior to the paving and sidewalk bond resolution being used.
Okay, so, Andy, so on that, so the next, so you didn't break out the 4 programs. Okay.
So the 4 programs, if we skip down to the CHIPS street paving, and I call it CHIPS street paving because everyone generally thinks of the street paving reimbursements as the CHIPS program itself. In a normal year, the CHIPS program is actually 3 programs, and then the arterial maintenance money was a separate funding source that was in this year's state budget. There's obviously no guarantee that it will be there next year. So the $5.4 million makes up CHIPS street paving, Extreme Winter Recovery, Pave New York, and the arterial maintenance monies.
Okay, so to stick with that, so we have, okay, so that's all of them combined or under that. and we've used only half. Will that roll over into next year?
The chips, the chips, everything but arterial maintenance is definitively known that it will roll over. Arterial maintenance,
So 50% of what we've been billed, not work completed,
correct.
Okay.
right? So like River Street and King Street and Fifth Avenue, what we're doing right now, hasn't been billed yet, and that's gonna be a significant dollar amount. So just keep that in mind, that not everything might be billed, so 50% is the billed number.
I mean, yeah, we got like extra money for paving and all that, and if we go into winter with a couple of these streets, and we'll talk offline, I have like huge concerns. A couple of streets, I don't know. I have to get an update. Aaron was giving me a really good update of like what's been done and what hasn't gotten to. Monica, by the end of the paving season, are we going to, and I get, so this is funding, not what's been paved. Are we going to be complete with the list that was put out? And there were like a couple streets like Northern Drive and Winter that just are war zones. Are they added? I mean, if we go into winter, we're gonna have real issues.
So, it all depends on the asphalt plant. If it gets to a certain temperature and the asphalt plant's closed, we don't do any more paving. So we can certainly have Aaron and Chip supply us an update. I know they are out in the field, Todd and Chip, especially with the work that's being done out front right now, are out in the field on a daily basis, but we can certainly email them with the council and have them provide an update as to the sheet that Aaron sent around previously, to show us where we're at. They have done a significant number of streets within the city of Troy. But also keep in mind too, that these are like complete mill and fills. This is breakdown, new curves, new everything, so, and then they're also prepping for next spring too. Like some areas where you see curb work being done right now is in preparation for the next paving season too. But we can get you an update.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. And yeah, and somehow the two streets I mentioned, I mean, they're really like in scary condition. But anyway, okay, thank you. So Andy will go back up.
Yeah, so are there questions about Block 1 ongoing projects?
Council President?
Yep, Councilmember Cummings.
So has that the 2020 paving and sidewalks, has that ban actually been issued?
Yes, it's been 30% expended to date.
Oh, okay.
Anything that is reflective on this sheet has been issued, and the column of balance of resolution is what is on paper that has not been issued to date. So for example, South Troy Road Phase 2 has been issued $359,000, and $1.2 million has not been issued because it has not been needed.
Great. That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Chair.
yep, Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Andy, just a quick question on the capital plan for paving and sidewalks. Where are the sidewalks being done? Is that the corners or the actual sidewalks?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be sidewalks, it's whatever that bond will cover. I think this is actually an intersection that they were looking at, that they weren't able to get reimbursed through the CHIPS and the state money. So a lot of all the side work that you're seeing being done right now is reimbursable under the state programs, especially the arterial highway, the new monies. So everything is being dumped into that account right now because it's reimbursable.
And it's unknown what will happen with that funding
So we're
on March 31st.
Right, so we're trying to spend it down as quick as possible.
But my question was, it's not sidewalks that are being done?
So the project description that's on here is what was presented as part of the bond resolution. So the bond resolution at its initial presentation to the city council 2 years ago was for $350,000 for paving and or sidewalks that were at the time not CHIPS eligible to be done. And the number one requirement to be funded through the CHIPS program or the other two programs, arterial maintenance is a separate entity in this context, is it has to have, the last time it could have been paved was over 10 years ago. And at the time, there was no arterial maintenance money like there is now. And that was the presentation of the $350,000 for sidewalks and or streets.
So I understand the 10 years for the paving. My question is sidewalks, you're using the terminology sidewalks, but sidewalks were not being done. Yes or no?
So only, Andy, how much has been spent?
30%.
So, yeah, so if the money hasn't even been expended yet, and I think this is an intersection, I think it's actually Jefferson and Third, this is where this funding is being allocated to at that intersection to do improvements at that intersection, because those improvements are not reimbursable under the federal money, the state monies that are reimbursable.
Thank you. That answers my question. It's for just that area down in Jefferson. It's not for throughout the city for sidewalks. That answers my question.
Now, well, hold on. So the specific funding that's already been spent, but if there's a situation in Lansingburg that is not something that's covered under the CHIPS money or the state highway money, it would be able to come out of this funding as well. It's not geographically restricted. It's a citywide bond. So it just is the work that needed to be done at this intersection is not a reimbursable project. So therefore, it has to be paid for out of either the general fund or specifically this.
Okay.
But it's not restricted to one particular thing. Like if you're at 108th and 6th Avenue, if something happened at that intersection that wasn't a reimbursable item, we could pay for that work out of this money.
Out of that money. Okay. All right. That makes it clear. Thank you.
Welcome.
All good? Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Siemens Energy Improvements, there's $8.25 million outstanding on phase 2 that's been fully issued. We hope to have a closing date from National Grid by the end of the year. And then we'll move forward. Well, Siemens will move forward with the conversion to the streetlights. Phase 3.
Andy, I apologize.
Yes.
I thought you were going to go through some of the other lines. I truly apologize. Sorry. So, you know, we've talked about this for a while. The park, the park bonding that the council authorized, the 2 mil. So 1 mil has been used to study that.
The 1 million has been issued.
Okay, now, okay, and only 5% used. So how much has been used? Do you know for the study?
5% of 1 million.
5% of a mil. Okay. All right.
And that's for CHA to create the construction documents to start the work. This goes to the email that Aaron sent you all an update on, that this is the construction documents to be able to do the work and bid it out this winter for spring start.
Okay. Yep. And North Lake's going to be added to that. I just had to plug that in. And State Street Garage. So 70% of that work has been done.
And if you can figure out how to get them to quit taking out the windows and the doors, that would be really great too. We've replaced more windows and doors in the last 2 months than anything.
And the gas tank removal, didn't we authorize that like 1.5 years ago?
It was authorized last December. It will be work that's completed, it will be begun once progression is made on the new facilities and traffic building. It is a project that's in concert with phase 3 of the Siemens project.
So once the DPW garage goes to site work, now that they have the slab and they're building the frames, once it goes to site work is when they'll start taking those tanks out and getting the temporary system put in place so they can do the replacement of that.
Okay, did anyone have any questions? Okay. Sorry, Andy, I didn't mean to interrupt you with the Siemens. I thought we were going to talk more. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So Siemens Energy Improvements Phase 2, Phase 3, there's $14.59 million outstanding on that project, encompassing both phases. The pro formas, just 2 items to note. The pro forma from Siemens for phases 1, 2, and 3, the debt costs are paid for by the future savings of the energy improvements and the acquisition of the streetlights. And I just want to touch on one note on phase 2. In 2019, it was originally approved for that phase to be on installment purchase debt. And then earlier this year, this council approved to switch it from installment purchase debt to a bond resolution. That created even more substantial savings to the city because of the lower interest rate that we get than as opposed to financing through Siemens Financial Services. Both of those projects are currently ongoing, where the deputy mayor and I are working to get the final documents to National Grid to set up a closing date. We are hopeful and anticipate that closing date occurring before the end of the year. Phase 3 is.
I hope so.
Phase 3 is currently ongoing as we speak.
So just to clarify what we mean by closing documents, so just a little detail for you. So there's these, we have to, because the city is self-insured, and National Grid obviously is, is asking us to insure these, because we're attaching to their light structures and their pole structures and stuff. Because we're self-insured, we had to do a little bit of different descriptions and backup letters and stuff like that, in addition to our regular certificates of insurance, which are normally issued. And another piece that there is because we're disengaging essentially the light structures from National Grid's infrastructure, we have to have specific connectors and connection points to separate the two. So there's no, essentially, for lack of a better term, for fire purposes, backdraft. You know what I mean? Like crossover between the two systems. We have to issue a surety bond to National Grid that guarantees that that work will be performed according to their specifications. That is what we're waiting for right now. We should have all of that information tomorrow, and then we will submit all of that documentation to them. I just want to make sure that you all understand it's not necessarily just shuffling a paper. It's an actual, we have the insurance company and we have Rick working on some stuff for us because of the wonkiness of how we're self-insured versus a traditional insurance program.
Sounds very complicated. Yep, Councilmember Cummings.
So this 8.25, when was that actually issued?
July.
So as long as it gets done by July, we won't have to reissue. That won't actually be in the reissuance.
Correct. If the full conversion is done by the end of June, then we would convert this to long-term debt.
Does the full streetlight conversion has to be completed before you can convert any of it to long-term debt?
I can do pieces of it, so I would probably at a minimum do the acquisition costs.
Okay, good. Because yeah, this is the only one where the 0.05% starts to, well, I guess compared to long-term debt, we're saving something on, I guess, I don't know.
And Andy,
you do save by keeping it on, the longer you keep it on short term. I mean, there's a balance, right? There's a common belief that interest rates are going to go up. in 2022, so there is a bit of a race to get items on long-term debt, depending on how much that bump ends up being.
That makes sense.
And Andy, I apologize. So that 2.1 in the first block, that's all going to long-term debt, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And then the Siemens, because it's still open, that will eventually go to long-term debt, as Councilmember Cummings pointed out, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Either in 22 or 23.
Okay. And then
The
DPW.
the last item is EFC finance debt. Certainly, as I mentioned before, I would suspect Thursday night we will have a very lengthy conversation about the water line project. So I would like, if the council's okay with that, to hold questions about that bond resolution that's on Thursday's agenda to Thursday evening. But this is what is currently outstanding to date. Cso Project, $3.2 million. Water line, $4.185. We draw this debt down. So as we pay invoices, it is submitted to EFC and they write us a check. It is not similar in any form or fashion to any of the bond anticipation notes from above.
Yeah.
It's drawdown. It's lovely.
That's rough. Yeah, we can talk about that. I'm sure the rest of the council is fine with talking about that on Thursday.
So I had sent a memo to the council last night. As opposed to reading it, I just want to go down a little ways. I certainly understand the concerns about the current status of what's outstanding on bond anticipation. But I would note we have not gone to long-term debt in 2 years. As you can see in what we just went through, bond anticipation notes, where they will be 12 months from today, is significantly different than where they are now. There was different reasons for not going to long-term debt. There's also a consideration, though, of the operational impact and the need for new vehicles within the city's general fund itself. And that's what this memo was pertaining to. As all of you know, the State Comptroller's Office in their budget review letter noted that there were multiple items on bond resolution that they noted. I have had multiple discussions with them during their budget review and subsequently about what their intentions are of that note, because personally I find it to be a little ambiguous. And I'm just going to move the letter over and have highlighted the section that they consistently refer to, in which they encourage the city officials to identify additional sources and to include them in the budget instead of continuing to rely on the issuance of debt to finance these purchases. There is no disagreement that the city, and we've talked about it I've been deputy comptroller since 2016. It's been a conversation every year. There needs to be a balance, though, of how much you can't put all of these vehicles in the operating budget on an annual basis. It has to be done incrementally. The city was successful in getting the police vehicles in the 2022 proposed budget. Those have a PPU of 3 years. However, taking the financial concerns and the operational need, what I would like to propose this evening is the following. The city's general fund capital reserve, as we sit here today, has a balance of $3.6 million in it. I would recommend appropriating $956,515 from the capital reserve to fund items in the general fund capital plan that have a PPU of less than 15 years and or have a value less than $200,000. If they don't meet that criteria, they would remain proposed to be on bond resolution. This is reflective, as you received last night, was a key of sorts of what I am proposing funding through the capital reserve would be anything in green. Anything in blue would be on bond resolution. From a financial perspective, there are certain items that should go on a bond resolution. For example, and it's not to pick on it, an aerial ladder truck of $1.3 million does not belong in the operating budget when it has a PPU of 20 years. However, city pool vehicles should be in the budget. It is something the city needs to move forward. As part of this recommendation, though, I am proposing that, and I will bring it forward in 2022, the city needs to have some sort of policy as to how assets like this are funded on an ongoing basis. It cannot be a policy that's ironclad, though. There has to be a balance of what can and can't occur. And it is more of a policy I would envision of what is not to be funded in the and what is not to be funded in the operating budget, as opposed to what can be, because it is a very what can be has a lot of variables depending on what the city's annual budget changes are. For example, if there's a significant increase in pension or a significant increase in health insurance, you would certainly not be able to fund as many vehicles. What this would do would move $956,000 off of being on a bond resolution. There are certain components, though, that would still be, such as the pickup trucks and the street sweeper and DPW, the facility improvements in the police department, the facility improvements in the fire department, ambulance and the aerial ladder truck in the fire department, the golf course improvements, the economic development of the Riverwalk Trail, Congress Street and Ferry Street, and South Troy Road Phase 2. Keeping the economic development projects on bond resolution is consistent with the policy we have. All three of those either have a grant or have a grant application in. The grant portions are cash flow purposes only. They're similar to what we just discussed. The garbage fund capital plan is continued to be recommended to remain on bond resolution, simply because there is not enough fund balance in the garbage fund to fund any of the items that are listed below or on the sheet.
Andy?
Yes.
I get, I mean, it's good moving forward. Obviously, we've talked about trying to fund equipment through the general fund. The whole formula for it, I take it that was run by the state comptroller's office or what other munis do, correct?
The state comptroller's office is aware of what I proposed this evening and what I proposed last night was discussed with the state comptroller's office.
And it's a lot of equipment. Have we spoken to the folks at the table? You know, sometimes obviously you amend things after initially proposed and, you know, geez, I might be able to go another year without such and such. Have we gone back to our departments, you know, to obviously ensure that, okay, we definitely need this next year. Guess what? By the time we purchase it, we'll be able to purchase it next or in 2023. Has that been done also? You know, a lot of times you go back after. Have we gone back?
So this is the need list that has been taken. We had a wish list that was presented. I think we talked about this in all of the budget hearings. A wish list was presented by all of these individuals and supervisors. This is actually what we came up with after we had many conversations with them. And that's also why they're here tonight. You wanted a capital plan conversation. So if there's questions you have on any of these items, they are here to have those conversations with you. So if you would like to amend the capital plan, they're available here to you for conversations as far as whether they think they need an aerial truck or whether they need a traffic truck or whether they have those things. I
do want to just note one thing as well. in years past, prior to the assembling this year's budgets, any year prior that I've been involved, departments simply put in their list. This year, everyone in this room filled out a sheet justifying their request for the capital plan. And I am sure that was not ideal to have them all fill it out. But
Especially Sean.
to merit the justification, that was the beginning of the review. And then we went through each item. So it was not, there was some legwork that had to be done to even get it on for consideration. There was justification provided at the outset of the budget process.
Council President?
Yep, Councilmember Cummings.
So for DPW, we got a very good NDPU. We got lists of all their current vehicles and vehicles outstanding. I had requested that from both the chiefs, and I think that's still outstanding from both of them. Sorry if I missed it. Either of you speak up. But that is very helpful to us in this, in terms of looking at the age of the vehicles and being able to back that up. So if that is possible to provide, it would still be helpful. That being said, I do want to break for a second to talk about sort of the policy and where we're aiming at. And particularly, I think with the police and fire trucks, there's significant sort of fit up costs. And I feel like certainly with fire trucks, I had heard there's some significant savings if we order two identical trucks as compared to a single truck. Is that true, or am I misremembering that, Chief?
No, that is true. Unfortunately, this is an aerial device that we are looking to order. This is the ladder truck.
Right.
If you will.
Sorry, I'm not trying to question the individual things on here. I think most of those have been pretty justified. I'm thinking more long-term in terms of the policy that we're developing here. And I don't know if the police chief, is there any similar savings for police trucks or SUV? These, we have how many marked SUVs are in this 196?
I believe there's 4, Councilman, and there is no savings as far as the amount of them that you.
So if we were to order 20 at a time, it wouldn't cost less per unit than ordering 4 at a time?
It wouldn't.
Okay. Then the strategy outlined here makes sense for that. For the vehicles that it does, we can get sort of bulk savings on it, seems like. And maybe we had done that a few years ago. Did we do that, Chief? Did you actually do that a couple years ago? Did we order 2 engines?
We did. We bought. We have placed 3 fire engines in service in the last 3 years. Each engine was identical, and because we did it that way, there was some cost savings.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Those answered my primary questions, and it sounds like you're all thinking it through and doing it the right way.
And listen, I will apologize to you. I thought that I have the list of vehicles right here. I will make certain that it gets forwarded to you first thing in the morning.
Thanks a lot.
Me too, Anasha. I apologize. I have
Thank you, Chief.
I'm going to send it to you right now, actually.
Okay.
I just sent it to you.
And
Thanks a lot.
no problem. Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. And Andy, the capital reserve, where is that in the back of the budget? Where'd you get the?
It's not.
956?
It is not listed in the budget itself. It is a balance sheet. It's on the AUD. And the audit, it's in the audit. It's in the notes. about the middle of the notes section. And then the AUD, it's in the balance sheet in the beginning of the document.
So it's more paper, not cash, or,
It's cash as well.
okay.
It's not an operating account though. It's a part of the city's fund balance.
How much is in that total? Oh, I see,
The total-
it has 3.6.
The capital reserve has $3.6 million in it. All proposed uses are eligible under New York State general municipal law for capital reserves.
And what's normally kept in capital reserves?
The city's fund balance dictates how much gets put in the city's general fund. The general fund balance policy allocates monies to the capital reserve depending on the annual year-end balances. The city does not have a policy that governs floors of the reserve accounts themselves.
Okay. Council members, any questions? Do we want to go through any golf course discussion, the 3.17? I guess equipment, does anyone have questions? And then obviously at the bottom, does anyone have questions regarding the golf course, the Riverwalk, South Troy Phase 2? No?
Sorry, Chair, I was reading. I do have a question on the golf course improvements.
Yep.
Can you give me a little information on what those improvements are? Did I miss something that was on that?
So at the back of your packet, Kim, there should be a set of documents that says list of tasks from the master plan. And it there's some yellow and green. And then Greg is here to talk about some of them if you want just an overview, similar to what we've done in the past.
I got it. I see this now. So.
Yep. We try to give you a breakdown of all the work.
Yep. Thank you. So on this here, 3 million, am I reading that right?
Yes, 3.175.
So I guess my question is on the revenue side of that, what are we actually bringing the money in to show that we can spend this money going out? Am I saying that?
So the thought process on this is Josh and Greg have talked about at their budget hearing is that improved drainage, which is probably the first half of the entire project, which is the most important piece, actually allows us to generate more revenue because the course is open earlier and longer, but also allows us to open up the full course versus just the front 9 versus the back 9 being flooded out. I mean, think of like July and August even this year, just in not even opening months. You know what I mean? Opening months, generally, they can't even use the back 9 because it hasn't drained from winter yet. So doing all of these improvements will actually enable us to open up more opportunity for revenue by allowing the course to be drained appropriately.
Council President.
Hold on, Councilmember Ash McPherson still has the floor. Greg, did you?
Go ahead right now. Go ahead right now.
Okay, Councilmember Cummings.
Yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, like currently taxpayers are subsidizing somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 a year. And the proposal probably lets us earn another extra $100,000 to $200,000 once it's all done and we can be fully open. Is that the rough estimate? So we be close to breaking even, but then we'd be paying down this bond. And, you know, I think we've gone back and forth a lot in terms of, obviously, there's a lot of value to beyond the direct revenue to the golf course in terms of, you know, bringing in sales taxes or bringing in visitors, et cetera. But you're not, there's no math that suggests that this bond pays for itself.
No,
right?
I don't see that.
There is no projection at this point in time, but just like any other city amenity, like the pool, for example, that has a revenue associated with it, potentially, you know, it doesn't necessarily always drive a revenue to cover its costs.
Right.
It's a city amenity. It also allows greater access to the trail network, to the park network, to the walkers, to the dog walkers, to everybody, the sled riders, everybody who utilizes that park as a whole. It is a city park, not just a golf course. The golf course offsets the cost of the park, which should be noted because it actually helps pay for itself versus like a Prospect Park or a Knickerbocker Park where, we don't necessarily have that revenue that's offsetting the expense.
Right. But the expenses are significantly higher. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
But so is the condition of the park.
I mean,
Absolutely.
listen, Councilmember Cummings, it's your floor. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think we've gone through this lots of times, and it's a question of, where we want to put that few $100,000 a year. Andy, what would the projected payment on this 1.175 be over the 15 years?
3.1.
Sorry, yeah, 3.
So I think it's hard to quantify because it's being presented as 3.175, but there would not be an issuance of 3.175 in a given year.
Yeah.
Being presented as 3.17, it's being presented as 3.175 because that's the cost over the remaining 4 phases of the project.
Understood.
The city, quite honestly, the city, by putting the bond resolutions up the way the city is putting them up in the tranches, and I understand that the council, wants to look at each phase. But however, the city is paying the bond council to write a supplemental bond resolution on an annual basis that, if it was approved, is the same way the debt would be issued anyways. If the 3.175 was approved, it would be issued in 6-month blocks based off of the cash flow need of the project for each applicable phase, which is why it's being presented in that manner. So it's difficult to do a projection because you'd be overlapping 5 years of analysis where the PPU would start on each issuance individually.
But in addition, by also not putting out the contract as a full contract and then doing the issuance in tranches like Andy's talking about, you also run the risk of the project actually costing more money. You'll have more contingency each time. You'll have more mobilization costs each time. You'll have more soft costs each time. You'll have construction inspection each time, where if you were able to put all of that in one lump bid, you would actually save on the actual construction cost of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not super comfortable committing future councils to wanting to support the ongoing phases. I think, phase 1 makes a ton of sense, clearly pays for itself in terms of drying out the course and being able to open it more. The further phases, I think are aspirational and they're great and they, certainly would improve the course. But, is there any structure for, to make sure future councils have input on whether or not that's a priority for the council at that time? This is a lot of money.
It's a good discussion, Councilmember Cummings, because, this is what we've talked about in prior years when it comes to the golf course. And, listen, I golf there. Greg, I love what you're doing. I'd love to hear from you directly also. And I love what you and Josh are doing. I mean, you literally have turned that golf course around 180. There's no doubt. However, you know, we have talked about, and I talked to Andy tonight. I mean, it's a big chunk to ask this council, and it will be done in phases, no matter what. Nobody can predict what the costs are going to be 2 years from now. And what if the costs go up for some of the phases? And we're committing future councils, and all of a sudden we've committed to 3.175. Oops, you know, kind of like other projects that we know, you put the bids out and they come back in higher. Boom. All of a sudden we have to, you know, maybe bond for more money, and that council, their hands are tied now because we've committed 3.175 to phase 2. And now all of a sudden we need another $500,000. Shoot. Now the council has to turn around. I'd rather it broken out, and you know, I'm willing to support the back nine. The drainage is horrific. I'm totally am for that, Greg. But, and believe me, this is an amazing breakdown. The work that you have put into this is awesome. But the grand total, a couple things, comes out here. It says 3.893. I take it maybe that's included in the 750 that we've approved for the initial phase. So what I'd like to see maybe is this broken down like into 3 phases. I just think asking the taxpayers for this council to turn around, do 3.2 mil all at once, you know, I do agree. I think it's an awful lot. And I would rather see it broken down phases. And I get the whole, like, you're going to put it into a holding account, not issue it until it's needed. At the same time, I think for us and for the taxpayers, you know, they're, no matter what, I mean, not everybody's listening to this. And the headline is the council authorizes 3.2 in bonding for the golf course, whether it's broken in phases, whatever, and it's not going to be issued. So I would rather see a phase breakdown and start out with the phase 1, the immediate, you know, the drainage, et cetera, and have, you know, just like you said, you're not going to issue it all at once. So let's not bond it all at once. I know we might be able to save maybe a little bit of money, but that's still not predicted in the future if there are cost overruns. And when the bids go out, no one's to say that the bids are going to come back. Who knows what the market is at that time? And that's just me talking out loud. Thank you. And Greg, I'd love to hear from you, but we'll open it up to other council members first.
Chair?
Yep,
So, Chair.
Councilmember Gully. We'll let Councilmember Gully and then we'll come back to the admin.
Well, I was
Go
just
ahead,
gonna have Greg give you an overview.
Okay, Councilmember Gully, it's up to you.
Well, before he gives the overview, I have a question for Andy.
Okay.
Andy, by breaking this down into segmented pieces and putting it out, I mean, I know the council president mentioned we save the taxpayer little money. Can you give me the definition of what we do save or what we can't save, or just an approximate?
And Andy stepped out for a moment.
We'll get, he's coming back in the door right now.
Good question.
He wants to know if we broke it down in phases, what the savings would be.
The additional cost.
Additional cost, Dan, Councilman, or savings?
The additional cost for bonding segments instead of bonding the 3.18.
So the city, the direct costs, there's 2 different paths. There's the direct cost. Every bond resolution, we pay bond counsel to write the resolution, and the city pays estoppel notice fees to the paper. While those may not seem material, there's the other side of it that the deputy mayor discussed. If the debt's issued in tranches, the bids occur in tranches. So you're going to pay mobilization costs. You're faced with you could be faced with other increased costs every time you bid. You also run the risk of company A winning bid 1, company A winning bid 2, Company B winning bid 3 and Company C winning bid 4. How, there's no consistency to the work that's being done when you do bids in that fashion. Whereas if the project was fully funded today, the city would be able to bid all 5 phases and have one company, well, 4 phases at this point because we have the bids back now on 1, and have consistency throughout, and you would have the avoided the mobilization costs, correct me if I'm wrong.
30,000.
The mobilization cost would be the biggest increased cost that you would probably incur every time.
It just depends, but if you bid it out all at one lump sum, say if you bid it out in the spring and we got really good pricing on this last round, you could actually tie people in now to that pricing versus pricing 2 years from now or later on down the road. It's a risk, obviously, because we don't know what the pricing is going to be forecasted, but at the same time, you get the surety of the fact that you have the number now and can lock it in going down the road, with the exception of prevailing wage increases in the middle of the summer.
So Andy, I want to go back to my original question. I know you answered it in words, verbiage, but if you were to give me a guesstimate of, like, let's say phase 1, if we went, what would the cost be to secure that bond, put that in a program, and then, like each stage, what does it cost us? What kind of value is that monetarily?
So you wouldn't, the cost you would have would be materially to write the resolution and the estoppel notice. It wouldn't have the cost of issuance of the debt, that all gets lumped together. So we do, if you go back to we have, every note is consolidated down and it's one singular debt issuance itself. So the actual issuance cost wouldn't change that much. It's more right now, the process that we're going through right now, we're absorbing, they may not be material costs, but we're using our bond counsel to write supplemental bond resolutions for the city. That's why I propose it in this fashion, is it's being written in the same way that the debt would be issued for council consideration.
Question is for Greg. Greg, could you give me your feelings on if it is broken down and we're not able to lock in one contractor? I don't know if you have any experience where you've come from where you've had to bring in multiple contractors for different pieces of a business model. But how do you feel about that? I mean, having different people in there.
Well, I had it happen to me in my previous job. During phase 1, we had one contractor, and we had the same architect for both, but each contractor is different. They each have their strengths and their weaknesses. It's like any relationship. You have a comfort level with each other. You work more efficiently. It just goes hand in hand.
All right, thank you.
Sure,
Just to get back to
Councilmember
the-
Gully. Councilmember Ash McPherson?
I was just thinking, and maybe I'm wrong in thinking this way, but if you do it in phases and you're comfortable with the one contractor you have, you can't do phase 1 with the contract, and when he completes that, go to the next phase, or however, with the same
No, we
contract?
can't do that
Or you're saying that you wouldn't be able to do that because a contractor wouldn't want to do that? He'd want it all at once?
We can't do that because of procurement law.
They'd have to come in competitive.
Right.
So it's a great example of that happening was with the seawall, the marina, and the Riverfront Park North project that we just completed. We put those all out separately to bid because of the fact that it was different funding streams, and that's how FEMA wanted us to do it. We had hoped that one contractor would be able to win all 3, but that wasn't in the cards. So we actually paid 3 different mobilization rates. We paid, and it's the coordination, all of it. Where one contract ends, where does the other one pick up, and that kind of thing. So coordination effort-wise, as far as administering the work, it's easier to do with one contract. I did want to, Greg is here. I wanted him to talk about both phase 1 and 2. We keep talking about the drainage, but the drainage actually is phase 1 and 2. So Greg is here to talk about that, just a real quick, if that's okay.
Correct, and the challenge we face is that this course was a 9-hole golf course initially built back in 1930s. So the front 9, 1 through 9, is 1930s, and the topography is completely different than the back. So the front is the older side, and the back is the newer side, but it has more drainage issues. So the complexity of that is, there's a lot of need across the board, and we've decided to focal point on phase 1 is the drainage. But since we've phased in number 1, now we're starting to have more issues on the front 9 with drainage as well, with the added water of this year. So that's why we went back to the drawing board and broke this down to 4 phases. Phase 1, thankfully came in yesterday, and it was very, very competitive. When Mark Mungem, our architect, did these numbers for us, he was based it on this year's projects, but the projects, there was one in Boston, Mass, and there was one down in Hoboken, New Jersey. And these numbers are more reflective for Troy, New York. He gave the most updated numbers he had based on the projects he had, but things are coming in cheaper for our region. So to get back to the phasing, as Monica spoke to, phase 1 is predominantly all drainage, but it doesn't encompass all the drainage. There's added need as we go, and that's throughout the golf course. Number 1, number 2, number 3, that wouldn't be a part of phase 1 is added need, and it just highlights how the longer we go along, there's going to be some more need as we go, and if we can lock in this as a totality of the whole project, it'll just work things a lot more seamlessly. So phase 1 and 2. Phase 2 is holes 9 through 18, which would encompass all the work listed. If you'd like to go through hole by hole, we can. But basically, phase 1 is kind of basically drainage, some new tees on number 2, and then everything is basically on the back 9, drainage-wise. Phase 2 would take care of all the tees. Again, this golf course 1 through 9 was built in 1931, and there basically has been no upgrades to the main parts, to the greens, to the tees, in all that time, believe it or not. There might have been a couple tees, forward tees added here or there, but it's in desperate need of an upgrade. Technology's changed. We need to keep up with the times and keep up with the other golf courses in the area.
Greg, just for clarification,
Yep.
on the council members, on the last page of that document from the golf course, it breaks down phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. Greg, are you talking about phase 1 is the one that we just did?
Phase 1 is what we got the bids back on
Correct.
yesterday.
And phase 2, where it says hole number 9 and the back 9?
Correct.
That is the additional drainage you're talking about?
That's the additional drainage and upgrades to bunkers, cart paths, additional drainage.
All right, I just wanted to clarify, because you said front 9, and that's actually phase 3 on here.
Phase 3. Phase 3 would be the front 9.
Okay, so we're just talking about phase 1 and phase 2 right now for the drainage part?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Basically, just like to open up to the floor to answer your questions. I mean, we can go hole by hole or whatever you would like to do.
I don't think that's necessary. Council members, any further discussion, question for Greg?
Council President.
Yep, Councilmember Gully.
Quick question, Monica, Greg, how did the bids go today?
The bids came in yesterday, and they were much lower than anticipated.
Much lower than nothing that we got before.
Correct.
Yeah, it was nice. We actually got 3 bids.
3 bids.
Two were competitive. One was probably just a submittal just to be fresh. But yeah, so they were good.
Council President?
Councilmember Cummings.
Excuse me,
Oh,
hold on.
sorry, go
I'm not done. On those bids,
Oh,
Greg.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gully, I apologize. You have the floor, sorry.
Thank you, Council President. Greg, on those bids, the contractors that bid, have you had any experience with them, and were you comfortable with any of the contractors that bid on the program?
I have not personally worked with either, but both were they both came up for both bid meetings. They've both been in contact with me through this whole process and are very interested in the job.
So considering this is a construction bid, it goes to the lowest bidder first, and then the bid is qualified and reviewed. Most likely Mark will do that with Greg.
Correct.
To make sure that all the items are inclusive of the bid and the work proposed. And then only if there is an issue with that would we go to the second bidder.
So currently, we're going through line item by line item, making sure everything's the way it's supposed to be. But to answer your question, Mark Mungem, our architect, has worked with both those companies. There's a list of references for each that I plan to call, and I feel comfortable with either one of them at this point.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the answers.
Thank you, Councilmember Gully. Councilmember Cummings.
So, Greg, in your ideal world, when would work start on phase 2, or would some of it end up being, like, if we were to approve all this, would that get bid and some of that might commingle with the work of with phase 1, or when would it make sense for you to start phase 2?
So the timeline in a perfect world, we're going to start this spring for phase 1 would be April. Substantial completion date of July 1, completely out by July 15th. Phase 2, in a perfect world, would start fall of 2022, October 1st, and finish spring of 2023.
So the idea is to have most of the work happening when the golf season is either before, after, or when it's light.
Correct.
Gotcha.
With this being a prevailing wage job, most of the work will be done by 3 o'clock anyway, so our leagues and our tournaments won't be affected. We might have to push the tournaments back till after the substantial completion date, but we should be good to go with that. So,
Andy, our second issuance date next year would be too late, it sounds like, to be able to put a bid out for phase 2. That was to plan.
In a world where, so let's assume that this, as proposed, the bond resolution was passed, it allows Greg to bid and go into contract for all 4 phases. Based off of the timeline Greg just said, we would issue a tranche. We would be able to make the date for the next issuance.
Right, but okay, so the council just has to approve. I guess 2 questions. One, did the bids come in good enough that we don't need to do another issuance in order to start with phase 1?
Yeah.
Or continue with phase 1? I don't know if that was ever part
Correct.
of it, but I did see the price went up, so it wasn't clear. So phase 1 can happen. The new council can get a nice tour of the work that happened, and in July, approve or not. When would you go to bid on phase 2 or phase 2 through?
So
4?
If this council is not voting on a bond resolution for phase 2 of the golf course improvements, the next council would have to pass a bond resolution no later than the June 2022 city council meeting to make the July debt issuance.
Correct, but at the same time, we wouldn't necessarily go out to bid until we knew we have bonding authorization to be able to sign the contract.
Correct. Greg will not make the window for his construction under that scenario.
Correct.
When would you have to go out to bid for phase 2 under your hopeful timeline?
be honest with you, I would probably recommend that they don't go out to bid until they get authorization.
No, clearly, but are you
So that
going,
would
are we
be
do,
if you
what,
if you authorized it in June or July, he would go out to bid, we'd have the document ready to go out to bid, you go out to bid in June or July, you would sign the contract and approve it in August, and then they would have to, then you would have to mobilize in the fall or whatever at that point in time. But that's if the council even approved it at that point.
and theoretically, I mean, I'm trying to understand the mobilization for each phase, with the current contractor who's going to be in there in the spring. If the bid was in, if the bids were awarded before they demobilized, would there be stuff they would do differently if they knew they had phase two? Is there a reason to try to push this so that, if they get phase two, or they can bid lower on phase two because they know they won't have to move certain equipment, or they're going to want to move it and use it over the summer anyway?
Well, to be honest with you, I guess in good faith and credit of the city, I wouldn't want to put out a work bid for $1.2 potential million without having the authorization to be able to pay for it. It wouldn't be a bid in good faith on our part.
I understand.
A solicitation.
I'm trying to understand if we approved this tomorrow, we're not going to, but if we did, we can, or if it was approved in January by the new council even, then would you go out to bid in March and try to have bids back before your bidder your current contractor demobilizes, or
Correct.
wait until
Correct.
July?
The ideal timeline would be to do the January, which would be done in January, Andy? January authorization. So in January, you would authorize the bonding. Once the authorization was had, it could go out to bid. We could generate the bid documents, get it out to bid, so that way the contractors could bid on it. If the winning phase one contractor won the second phase, then they could, obviously keep their mobilization intact and then be able to run from July 15th right into the second phase. That would be the ideal conditions, but that's, you run the risk right now because the way the start of this project was done it was done in the phases that we're talking about. So just like the other projects that we've done in the past with this situation, we most likely will have additional costs for phase two just because of the way it was authorized. But the ideal scenario would be that the winning bid for phase one would win phase two, but you can't guarantee that, obviously.
Right. I mean,
The other way to think
what
about
would
it,
they
too, is
do
we were
different?
supposed to be-
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
The other piece is we were supposed to be doing the work right now for phase one, so that's the other piece to think about, is we're already behind an entire season. By the time we get going here in the spring, the phase one was supposed to be completed, or just about completed by the time they get started. So we're already behind on this.
Understood. So what would you're going to choose a contractor to do this first phase in the spring? When did you say you want them out by to start the season?
So the way the contract states right now, they have to be done completely by July 15th. They have to be done with everything in phase one.
Okay. So between July 15th and mobilization for phase two, what does your contractor do differently if they know they if they already know they have won the bid? If we tell them they've won the bid in June, what do they do differently on July 15th compared to without that notification?
Well, I would assume it would save tremendously on the mobilization fee, because they would leave a lot of their equipment here. Because it would only be down, they would start back up in another 2 months.
Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
So as we're continuing to talk about this, I also want to make sure that everybody doesn't have any other questions about the other equipment that's that we have representation here in the room through DPW, through the OGS commissioner, and also not through the commissioner, but the OGS departments, and also through the garbage. But one thing I will say, and Andy alluded to this earlier, is if it's something that I know that the capital plan puts forward all 4 phases, the rest of the remaining phases for the golf course. I know, Council President, you had mentioned something about the drainage components of it. If it is something that the council would consider, although not ideal, to authorize the entire project to get the total cost out, if we can at least get the drainage portions of this out so that we can get the work out to bid early, so that we can hopefully continue on for 2022 and get these other drainage issues happen, that could also be something that is proposed for the capital plan as well too, to consider.
Okay.
Chair.
But I did want to make sure that there wasn't any other questions for the other crew too.
Yep. Hold on one sec, Councilmember Cummings. Are you good?
No, yeah, I'm good for now.
Okay. Do council members and
I do. I'm sorry. because
go ahead,
Greg, I just
Councilmember
had a
Ashton
question, and I
McPherson.
apologize.
Yeah, you're fine.
I apologize that we keep on going on the golf course, but you got to realize that's a lot of money right now that I'm going back and forth on. You said you're behind right now. Why are you behind right now?
We never got any bids the first round.
Remember, we went to you guys about the prevailing wage issue because we didn't receive any bids?
Right. I'm just trying to ask Greg why
Not the
you're
prevailing
behind.
wage. Sorry, not prevailing wage, the union
No,
shop and the
the
apprenticeship
apprenticeship.
program. I'm sorry. Right, sorry.
So Greg,
didn't
we're
receive
behind
any
because
bids.
why?
We never received bids the first time. We went out to bid, it was in July, we were supposed to have a bid opening, and we never had any bids, so we had to resubmit with the language changed for this phase. So we were supposed to start work October 1st.
Sorry. So you did get some bids back.
Since we've changed the language, now we received 3 bids yesterday for phase 1, correct?
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Do council members have, we can, obviously, it's up to the council, continue in the golf course. Or do you have questions regarding any of the other equipment needs? Andy obviously is proposing a little bit different of a formula. I think that that's very positive, and continues to work to get the equipment out of the general fund. I did have one question. We are talking, about phased, et cetera. Now the Congress Street and Ferry Street, and you know what? If we don't have questions for the others, I don't want them to have to obviously sit through the rest of this. So it's up to the council. I mean, obviously, listen, Greg, I think all of us are, obviously just struggling with the dollar amount, and, no matter what, it's not everyone, unfortunately, sees all of the benefits of the golf course. It is our city asset, and I love it, and I love how we've turned it around, and a lot of people are utilizing it for other purposes in the off season, especially. So obviously we see that, but it's it's a big chunk of money, and it does tie future councils. If obviously overruns come in, we've seen that with many other projects, and it is going to tie their hands. Not to say that they're not going to support the golf course. I'm sure they are. So, it's just something we gotta work through and figure it out. Does anyone else have any questions? And
Council President,
yes, Councilmember Gully.
I just want to point out that years ago, we stopped investing in the golf course. And I know we have this year, but I just want to point out that when that happened, it became sporadic through numerous councils, and the golf course went to a place that really wasn't much better than a cow pasture with a gopher hole in it, which was very deafening to people who are in the sport. Although many people have tried, they just didn't have the proper funding to create what Greg Tudor, his crew, and Josh Buell have created up there. And I just want you to understand that I realize we think about spending money, but if you had a car and it was broke down and you wanted to run it, even if it got you to work and you needed tires, you'd put it on it. So what I'm saying is that what we have to look at is a long-term fix, long after this money is invested in the course, long after we expand the amount of time that golfers can play, long after we make it a little better than what it is now, which it's a premium course, the revenue stream that will come from that will come tenfold over the next 20, 30, 40 years from the work that we create today. So I understand it's a big bite. I really do. I truly understand. I question it sometimes myself, but then I realize that if we really want to be a council to think of the future, we have to really think about how we invest and make sure that this golf course becomes a premium municipal course, because it's already getting recognition locally and around the area. I think it'll expand out further than that if our superintendent and our pro shop manager are allowed to just put the pieces together. I have seen numerous new people at the golf course that I've never seen before, and I found it to be a lot harder to get tee times because of the limitation with the weather. We've had a terrible year. But I just want the council to think about this as we move forward, that we're the ones that can make a decision and make sure that that diamond in the rough becomes a diamond. And yes, does it put a little pressure on everybody? But do we want to leave a decision with a almost completed golf course up to individuals who might not have any experience with this as we have had? Because I know every one of us has visited the golf course or played there or had conversations, and we understand the value of what we're building here. We're building something for the future. So I know it's a lot of money. I agree it's a lot of money. But do we just say, let's put this on the shoulders of future councils to complete the job that we should be looking at? Because I don't like to leave anything incomplete when I walk away from something. And I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about that, because the revenue stream isn't during the point we pay this note back. The revenue stream for us starts after that note is paid and continues 30, 40 years. And what will that additional income be? Probably more than what they're going to invest in this phase. So I just want you all to think about that as we work through this situation. But I just think that we're putting one nail in the wall and saying, let's let the other council put the other nail in there. I don't know if that's good business or not for a group of people that are supposed to be thinking about the future of this city. That's all.
Thanks, Councilmember Gully. And, I think the struggle is, do we do phased approach? We did go that route, and the golf course continues to move forward, and we did approve phase one. So we were asked to do the whole nugget, if you recall, 2 years ago and a year ago. And each time we said, you know what, we're going in phases. I don't think that that's, just putting, kicking the can down the road. What we say is we're going to invest in a phased approach rather than the full nugget. And so anyway, yes, we'll talk about it. I totally get where you're coming from.
Just a footnote, kicking the can down the road was not my statement.
I'm sorry. Okay. Any other council members? Okay, any questions for anyone else at the table? Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us and weathering this torturous meeting. But we appreciate all of your input and everything. So thank you. And Andy, we'll keep rolling. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
No questions for any other,
Can I did have a question on the Congress and Ferry. We have 1.9 for 2022 and 10.5 for 2023. What's all about that? And a little bit more details is that, like, what's the 10.5? I mean, obviously you've broken that up. What's the 1.9?
So the Congress Street and Ferry Street project for the 1.9, that is the design phase of the project, which will occur in 2022. And then we'll also, this is the one that CBTC has already awarded us a grant for. We have a 20% match on that grant. The grant, just like the Campbell Avenue Bridge, includes design and construction.
How much, what was the grant for that one, the total?
So the current tip has for just the this is not including the bridge, because remember the bridge was a not a member item, earmark in the federal infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
So the current tip for this section between 8th and River Street is a little over $4 million.
Okay, so the 1.9 that we're being asked to bond for what are we being reimbursed out of that, 80%?
Yeah, I believe so. I think, yeah, there might be a little bit of extra for design costs of the Congress Street Bridge. We are intending to apply for those infrastructure grants, even though they're not earmarked. There will be ability to apply and get funding through those programs. So obviously we're going to try to do that as well too. This is if you remember, I sent the council the drawings, like last month or whatever. So
yeah.
So this is everything. This is everything but the bridge.
And I'm aware of the project. I was just curious of the funding, because obviously, that's another bond. So, obviously to get more particulars.
Yeah, but this one has a match. This is a grant.
Okay. Okay. And then the 7.25 we talked about. Any questions on the garbage, folks, even though our folks have left? All good? Okay, Andy, you're up. Payback, I don't know if you want to touch that at all.
So I did take the screen sharing down. I've included an analysis of payback that I have done traditionally for the council. It's great. I tried to make it as straightforward as possible. It assumes a 5-year issuance on ban and then conversion to long-term debt. So it's, in a lot of ways, right, worst case scenario, if there's ability in the budget to pay down more in principal while it's on short term, we certainly would. But it's reflective of items in the capital plan for the garbage fund and then the general fund, with the exception of the golf course improvements, because I wanted to talk with the council this evening about the different options the city has to finance, right? The full shot versus phase 2. And then not included is the grant reimbursed projects as well. Over the years, I've found that analysis is not most accurately reflective of what can actually occur with the project because of timing of construction and grant reimbursements and things of that nature. So it's reflective of the vehicles, the facility improvements, and then the items within the garbage fund themselves.
And Andy, I apologize. On the sheet with the operating fund, taking funding from the operating budget, did we add more than what was initially proposed on top? Because I know,
No,
okay,
no. So the items that are in orange on that sheet are reflective of items that are currently in the proposed budget.
okay. Okay, thank you. Do council members have any questions? Okay. A lot of info. You have done an incredible job here, Andy, breaking it down for us. You know, a lot going on, obviously. Okay. Questions, discussion, anything else? All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, council members, Zaluski, is there a second?
Give a
Second.
second, but Chair,
Second,
just wanna
council
say-
member Gully, and on the discussion, council member Ash McPherson.
sorry, just real quick. I just want to say, Andy, thank you. Was very helpful, everything you broke out. I really appreciate the way you did this. You gave a lot of information, a lot to digest. But it's pretty clear and I like the way you did it. So thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you again, Andy, really helpful. Okay, further discussion? All in favor?
Thanks to everybody.
Okay. Good night.